My name is Wright. I am the voice of reason. I speak for the Last Crusade.
L. Frank Baum, the royal historian of Oz, in his book Queen Zixi of Ix, reports that the immortal fairy tale witch Queen Zixi has riches, magical power, health, and the appearance of endless youth, and everything else her heart desires, but one thing only. Her image in the mirror shows her to be an unsightly old hag, not the young and beautiful queen she appears to be to all other eyes. The queen hears of a magical cloak that will grant the wearer his heart's desire. After using her magic to deceive the innocent children to whom the fairies gave the cloak, Queen Zixi discovers that this cloak grants no wishes to anyone who steals it. Hopes dashed, Zixi weeps in utmost wretchedness and tosses aside the cloak, which she had struggled so hard and so sinfully to acquire, to leave it ignored on the grass. As she walks, she comes across a rugged old alligator laying on a riverbank, weeping with bitterness equal to her own. The alligator says that he weeps because he cannot climb a tree. Why does he wish to climb? Because he cannot. Next, she finds an owl lamenting that he cannot swim like a fish. Why does he wish to swim? Because he cannot. Then Zixi comes next upon a little girl sobbing with sorrow. The little girl wishes to be a man. Why? Because she is not one. This reply makes Zixi angry, and she calls the girl a fool. "There are other fools in the world," says the child, and renews her sobs. Let me here quote the text in full. Zixi did not reply, but she thought to herself, "We are all alike, the alligator, the owl, the girl, and the powerful Queen of Ix. We long for what we cannot have, yet desire it not so much because it would benefit us, as because it is beyond our reach. If I call others fools, I must also call myself a fool, for wishing to see the reflection of a beautiful girl in my mirror, when I know that it is impossible. So hereafter I shall strive to be contented with my lot." This was a wise resolution, and the witch queen abided by it for many years. She was not very bad, this Zixi, for it must be admitted that few have the courage to acknowledge their faults and strive to correct them as she did. End quote. This was written in AD 1905 and was presumed by the publisher and the public alike to be fit reading material for the entertainment and instruction of the young. In those days it was well known that youth would not attend lectures that hectored and tongue-lashed them into virtue, but stories they would read that opened the inner eye of imagination and could give them images bright as the emblazon on a knightly shield, which would bring firmness into a tempted heart in an hour of weakness. Many a child might, when tempted to envy a thing craved only because it was forbidden or out of reach, recall to mind the folly of the climbing alligator, the swimming owl, and the little girl who wanted to be a man, and would return to sober thoughts with a laugh and a blush of shame. But surely any modern reader, reading the above passage in L. Frank Baum, would have noticed something odd. If you are a modern youth, educated in modern schools, you have been conditioned in the proper Pavlovian fashion to react to the third absurdity in this list of shameful absurdities in precisely the opposite way that your grandparents, parents, or you yourself 5 years ago would have viewed it. If you have been properly conditioned, when the stimulus of hearing the wish of the little girl to be a man called absurd is exposed to your ear, your automatic response should be to have your mouth call that attitude problematical, inappropriate, mean-spirited, judgmental, or even bigoted. If the impulse can travel directly from the nerves of the ear to the nerves controlling the vocal cords without traveling through or even near the cortex, so much the better. Now, the progress of science from that day to this has discovered no particular example of little girls growing up into men or little boys growing up into women, and the techniques of castration and genital mutilation, the injection of hormones and plastic surgery, while considerably more cunning than what was known in 1905, has not in truth granted any real person the magical fairy cloak which allows one truly to change his sex. What has changed, and the only pertinent thing that has changed, is language. Our Pavlovian conditioners have the goal of making their patients, us, respond with words like problematical, inappropriate, mean-spirited, judgmental, or bigoted, first, to the use of the pronoun he as a pronoun in order to refer to man of either sex. Second, to refer to men and not words as having sex rather than gender. Third, to refer to men of both sexes as men. These changes are not meant to clarify language, but to obscure it. Specifically, they are meant to present to the gullible the idea that no innocent use of language is possible. Using English according to the accepted rules of grammar, that is, the non-politically correct forms, is held to be an oppression, a small-scale aggression, and an insult to the spirit of women. The belief that Mohammedanism is a source of oppression, large-scale aggression, insult, and genital mutilation, mass rape, and honor-killing of women, not to mention an insult to her spirit, on the other hand, is held by the politically correct to be a psychopathological condition called Islamophobia. Also, the use of the term Mohammedanism is problematical, inappropriate, mean-spirited, judgmental, or bigoted. Please note that in neither case does the Pavlovian conditioner attempt to tell us what a proper and healthy and virtuous attitude might be. What, pray tell, is one's attitude toward the fair sex supposed to be? Chivalry is held to be a condescending insult. Romance is held to be a trap. Marriage is torture. Children are an imposition one can freely choose to escape, not by the chaste and prudent selection of when and with whom to copulate, but by prenatal infanticide. And what, pray tell, is one's attitude toward Mohammedanism to be? Chivalry, such as motivated the Crusaders to rescue Christian lands from Paynim invaders and to defend Western civilization from Eastern barbarians, is clearly condemned. Love of one's family, clan, community, nation, traditions, laws, constitution, all put at risk by the influx of violent jihadists bent on imposing Sharia law, is dismissed as contemptible. Even the recognition of the truth about the religion of peace, namely that it neither preaches nor promotes peace, is censured, nay, damned, as damnable. In both cases, the Pavlovian conditioners seek to condition you to surrender to the demands, no matter how unreasonable, of the feminists on the one hand and the multiculturalists on the other. But it must be noted that the feminists do not speak for the majority of women, and most are not women themselves, but are white men of Jewish or Christian background, now practicing atheism or spiritualism or neo-paganism. Likewise, it must be noted that the multiculturalists do not speak for the Mohammedans, and none are Mohammedan, but are white men of Jewish or Christian background, now practicing atheism or spiritualism or neo-paganism. Finally, it must be noted that the Pavlovian conditioners not only want to condition you to surrender without a fight, they also seek to condition your foes to make demands that reason cannot sate. If the Mohammedans desired peace with Israel, for example, land for peace or a two-state solution or any solution would have been found decades ago. They say what they want and are not shy about it, the utter destruction of the state of Israel and the death of all the Jews. It is not as if the Jews are doing something or failing to do something which, if done or not done, would soothe any umbrage. There is no claim being made of any needed restitution. If each and every Jew in Israel departed from that tiny nation and moved to Antarctica, the jihadists would follow them there and blow up schoolgirls, and the progressives would excuse the acts and call any man who did not buy the foolish excuses bad names. If the feminists wanted legal equality between male and female, they would not complain about rocket scientists wearing shirts with patterns of racy bathing beauties on them, because this has no effect on legal equality. They would not complain about there being more men than women in rocket science, any more than Irishmen complain about there being more German brewers than Scottish brewers in America, or that Caucasians complain about there being more Negroes than Caucasians in the National Basketball Association. Of course, there is an inequality of numbers in all these fields. Miller, Pabst, Schlitz, Budweiser, Stroh, Erlanger, Goebel, Schmidt, and so on all outsell any Scottish brewmeister. Indeed, I am hard-pressed to name a single Scottish brewmeister at all, except ironically for one named Brewmeister. If we were to believe the logic of the Pavlovian conditioners, we would believe that the use of German words like Brewmeister somehow causes or creates a sinister advantage for Germans over Scotsmen in the American beer market. If we only change the vocabulary words, so runs the theory, we will be conditioned to respond as desired to the stimuli. But why do we hear no complaints by Scotsmen about the Scottish being unfairly and micro-aggressively denied beer equality with the vicious and sinister Germans? Why do we hear nothing but complaints by feminists and multiculturalists that women and Mohammedans are subject to cruel oppressions, unequal representation among comic book characters, and endless victimization by some sort of alleged white privileged patriarchy? This, when evidence is unambiguous that laws and customs, which have been in place for years, promote and protect and encourage women to enter traditionally male fields, and for Mohammedans to take over traditionally Christian lands, laws, customs, and institutions. We live in a nation that obviously and openly grants Negroes and Hispanics privileges, hiring preferences, and the genuflection of lower standards, but the Pavlovians wish to condition us to react as if Christian Anglo males receive some sort of unidentified privilege from some sort of unidentified source. How is the wish for male girls, which common sense and common decency once condemned as no less absurd than the wish for tree-climbing alligators or swimming owls, now become accepted as normal? The answer is so simple that it needs no argument. Envy. Envy is the reason. Envy is what the conditioners have conditioned this generation to take as their highest virtue and noblest goal. The envy of the alligator for the squirrel, of an owl for a fish, or a little girl to be a man produces nothing but misery. But the conditioners never cease to attempt to condition us to have exactly this reaction, the reaction of envy, between two persons equally protected by equal laws, so that each will envy whatever difference of nature or nurture makes one different from the other in any way. The promise of the conditioners is that once we are all as identical and homogeneous as grade A eggs and have no differing characteristics, we will all finally be equal and envy will no longer bite. Is anyone foolish enough to believe that promise? The envy of women for the legal privileges of men, even back when such privileges existed, was not encouraged in order to sponge those privileges away. Had that been their goal, the feminists would have folded up shop and gone home once the right to vote and the right to own property was granted to all their sisters. Instead, the feminists, to this day, insist that they are still damsels in distress, helplessly tied to the railroad tracks by the evil patriarchy, and they must scream and scream until a prince on a white charger, in the form of intrusive progressive totalitarianism, will rush in, sweep her off her feet, and make her a princess without her ever having to lift her delicate Victorian finger. And while he is at it, the prince can thrash any blackguards whose speech or even thoughts the matron regards as problematical, inappropriate, mean-spirited, judgmental, or, in other words, improper or indecent. The modern feminist then displays her manly strength of spirit by retreating in terror into a safe space where she sniffs the smelling salts to prevent a fainting spell from overwhelming her. Now, the sad truth is that the breakdown of motherhood, of the family, and the alienation of child from parent is the goal. Because only if the family is weak and all children are schooled and conditioned by the state is the gluttony of the state for power fed. Feminine women and matronly mothers, faithfully married to one man for life, tend to be happy, and to raise Christian children who also tend to be happy. No opportunity for revolt, social tumult, or revolution to carry the conditioners to power exists under happy conditions. It is assumed that some of these evildoers want chaos to aid their power lust, but it's also assumed that others just want to see the world burn. And likewise, the conditioners do not wish to encourage the envy of the barbaric Mohammedan for the civilized West in order to produce an equality to sponge away all differences in degree of civilization, nor do they wish to share all wealth equally. If that were their goal, the feminists would insist that pressure, or even force of arms, would be used to grant equality under the law to women currently oppressed by Sharia law, which treats the fairer sex as legally inferior. So equality is not their goal. Barbarism is their goal. A religion powerful enough and motivated enough to wipe out the Christian religion is their goal. Wiping out the Christian religion is their goal because Christianity is the sole worldview fitted to human life on earth. Hence, Christians, faithfully practicing their religion, tend to be happy even during martyrdom, and tend to raise Christian children to be happy. As said above, happy conditions offer less opportunity for revolt, social tumult, or revolution. And envy? No one can be happy who envies. Those who encourage and inflame the fires of envy are not seeking your happiness, they are seeking your misery.